Captain Elijah Eli Ford hunched over the bar counter, his shoulders rounded like a crumpled blueprint of a man who had been designed for better days. The dim, flickering neon of the nebula's edge bathed his drink in a sickly green light, casting shadows over the scars on his knuckles and the regret etched into his face. He wasn't sure what was worse, the bitter burn of the alien whiskey or the memories that came with it. This was his haven, if you could call it that. The nebula's edge wasn't the kind of place you brought a date or even mentioned to someone you respected. Perched precariously at the edge of Galaxy Station 34, it attracted the kind of patrons who considered bounties on their heads to be a minor inconvenience. Eli fit right in. As he swirled his drink, the doors hissed open, letting in the station's perpetual hum of machinery and stale recycled air. He didn't look up. Trouble always walked through those doors, and tonight, Eli wasn't in the mood to deal with anyone else's bad decisions. He had plenty of his own. But then he heard it, a voice that cut through the bar's low rumble like a comet streaking through the void. "I waited for you for so long, human." The voice was unmistakable, rich and melodic with a timbre that seemed to hum in the spaces between words. Eli froze, the glass halfway to his lips. Slowly, he turned. She stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the bar's pulsing neon sign. Her form was unmistakably alien, yet undeniably graceful. Luminescent blue skin shimmered faintly, and her dark, silver-streaked hair flowed like starlight. Her eyes, glowing softly with an inner light, fixed on him with an intensity that could have powered the station's core. "Cathara," Eli croaked, nearly choking on his own voice. She crossed the room with the kind of calm purpose that made everyone else instinctively step aside. The hum of conversation faltered. Even the jukebox stuttered into silence. Cathara slid onto the stool next to Eli, her movements as fluid as liquid mercury. "You don't look surprised to see me," she said, her voice tinged with both amusement and something heavier. Eli stared, trying to process the impossible. He had last seen Cathara nearly 20 years ago, during a mission gone catastrophically wrong on the far-flung planet of Nixterra. The world had been crumbling beneath their feet, and in a moment of desperation, he had blurted out words he hadn't meant to carry weight. "Wait for me. I'll come back for you." He hadn't. "How did you find me?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Cathara leaned in, her glowing eyes narrowing in mock indignation. "You left a trail of bad decisions and worse one-liners across 3 sectors. It wasn't exactly difficult." The corner of Eli's mouth twitched despite himself. "Sounds about right." She tilted her head, studying him with a mix of curiosity and something else he couldn't quite name. "You're older than I expected. Humans age like... What's that earth fruit? The one that bruises if you look at it wrong?" "Bananas?" Eli offered dryly. "Yes, bananas." Her expression was perfectly serious. "You're like a bruised banana." Eli couldn't help it. He laughed, a genuine belly-shaking laugh that startled even him. It had been years since anyone had made him laugh like that. "Glad to see you've been working on your stand-up routine," he said, leaning back. "So, what brings you to this side of the galaxy, besides tracking down old promises?" Her expression softened, and the humor in her eyes dimmed slightly. "You promised you'd come back. I waited." The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy cloak. He wanted to deflect, to make another joke, but the look in her eyes stopped him. She meant it. She had waited. "Cathara, Don't," she interrupted, holding up a hand. "Not yet. You'll explain yourself eventually, but first..." She reached into the folds of her sleek silver cloak and produced a small pulsating orb. Its surface seemed to ripple like liquid metal, and faint symbols flickered across it in a language Eli couldn't read. "What is that?" he asked, leaning closer. "This," Cathara said, her tone both reverent and teasing, "is the reason I'm here. Well, one of the reasons. Let's call it Exhibit A in the case of why you, Captain Ford, owe me more than an apology." Eli frowned. "Owe you? I don't even know what that thing is." Cathara's lips curved into a smirk. "Oh, you will." Before he could press her further, a burly alien with 4 arms and a face like a melted candle loomed over them. "Hey, Ford," the alien growled. "You're sitting in my seat." Eli sighed, rubbing his temples. "Really, Grak? There are 20 other stools in this place." "Yeah, but that one's my favorite." Cathara, watching the exchange with mild amusement, leaned toward Eli. "Is this another one of your bad decisions?" Eli shrugged. "You could say that." Grak's patience, or what passed for it, ran out. He reached for Eli, but before he could make contact, Cathara raised a hand. A faint hum filled the air, and Grak froze, his expression shifting from anger to confusion. What's happening?" he stammered, his 4 arms twitching. Cathara's smile was sweet but sharp. "Gravity manipulation. Don't worry, you'll only feel like you weigh twice as much for the next, 5 minutes. Consider it an incentive to find another stool." Grak stumbled away, muttering curses under his breath, and the bar's patrons returned to their drinks, pretending they hadn't been watching. Eli shook his head. "You've got a way of making an entrance." Cathara sipped a drink she hadn't ordered. "I've had 20 years to practice." As the bar returned to its usual chaos, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that his past had finally caught up with him, and that Cathara, with her jokes and her impossible artifact, was just the beginning. The hum of Galaxy Station 34's artificial atmosphere barely registered as Eli followed Cathara out of the nebula's edge. She moved with the confident precision of someone who knew exactly where she was going, even though Eli was fairly certain she'd never been here before. "Do you always walk this fast?" he called after her, struggling to keep up. "Do you always walk this slow?" She shot back over her shoulder, her tone light but her pace relentless. "I'm not slow, I'm just cautious," he muttered, dodging a vendor selling suspiciously glowing fruit. Cathara stopped abruptly, turning to face him with a bemused expression. "Cautious? Is that what you call it? Because from what I've seen, you're more reckless with flair." Eli rubbed the back of his neck. "That's unfair. I don't have flair." She laughed, a sound like chimes caught in a gentle breeze. "Well, at least you're consistent." They continued through the winding corridors of the station until Cathara stopped in front of a docking bay. The door was marked with the universal "Keep Out" sign that usually meant something interesting was inside. She placed her palm against a scanner, and the door hissed open, revealing a sleek, silver ship docked inside. The vessel was unlike anything Eli had ever seen. Its surface shimmered like liquid starlight, and its design was impossibly elegant, clearly alien in origin. "Nice ride," Eli said, whistling low. "Let me guess, you built it while waiting for me?" Cathara gave him a sidelong glance. "Not quite. This ship was part of my inheritance, though I did spend a few decades making upgrades." "Decades?" Eli frowned as they stepped inside. The interior was as impressive as the exterior, with a minimalist design that managed to feel both futuristic and oddly comforting. "How long exactly did you wait for me?" Cathara's expression softened as she settled into the pilot's chair. "Long enough to teach myself 50 Earth languages, master the art of stellar navigation, and become an expert in sarcasm. So, long." Eli leaned against a console, trying to process her words. "Why? Why would you wait? I didn't even think—" "That's the point, isn't it?" she interrupted, her voice quiet but firm. "You didn't think, but I did. You were the first person who didn't treat me like some strange relic of a dying world. You made me believe there was something worth waiting for." Eli opened his mouth to respond, but the ship suddenly jolted, and a holographic display lit up with warning signals. "What was that?" he asked, straightening. Cathara's fingers danced over the controls, her expression sharp. "Proximity alert. Something or someone is trying to access the docking bay." Eli glanced at the display. A trio of small ships appeared on the screen, their angular designs and matte black exteriors unmistakably belonging to bounty hunters. Great, Eli muttered. They're probably here for me. Cathara arched an eyebrow. You really do have a gift for attracting trouble. It's not a gift. It's a curse, Eli said, strapping himself into the co-pilot seat. Can this thing outrun them? Cathara smirked. Outrun? Human, this ship could outdance them. With a flick of her wrist, the ship roared to life, the hum of its engines resonating like a symphony. They shot out of the docking bay, the stars blurring as Cathara executed a series of sharp maneuvers that left the bounty hunters scrambling to keep up. Eli clung to the armrests. Do you have to be this enthusiastic about flying? Would you prefer I fly slower and let them catch us? I'd prefer not feeling like my organs are trying to rearrange themselves. But sure, let's call that Plan B. Cathara laughed, her hand steady on the controls as she guided the ship through a dense asteroid field. The bounty hunters followed, their ships weaving through the debris with practiced ease. They're persistent, Cathara remarked. Yeah, well, persistence is part of the job description when you're hunting someone for money, Eli said, glancing at the scanner. Got any fancy tricks up your sleeve? Cathara's eyes gleamed. Do you trust me? Eli hesitated. I feel like that's a loaded question. She didn't wait for an answer. With a sharp turn, she directed the ship toward a massive asteroid with a jagged opening that looked barely wide enough to fit through. We're not seriously— Hold on, she said, cutting him off. The ship dove into the asteroid's cavernous interior, the walls flashing past so close that Eli could swear he heard them scraping the hull. Cathara navigated the tight spaces with ease, her confidence unshakable. Behind them, one of the bounty hunters miscalculated a turn and exploded against the rock. One down, Cathara said with a grin. Remind me to never question your driving skills again, Eli muttered, his knuckles white as he gripped the seat. Cathara's smile widened. Noted. As they emerged from the asteroid, Cathara activated a series of switches, and a glowing energy field enveloped the ship. What's that? Eli asked, staring at the shimmering light. A little something I picked up while waiting, Cathara said. It scrambles their sensors. They won't be able to track us. Sure enough, the remaining bounty hunters veered off in different directions, their scanners unable to lock onto the ship. Eli exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Okay, I'll admit it. You're good. Cathara leaned back in her seat, her expression smug. I know. As the ship settled into the relative quiet of open space, Eli turned to her, his curiosity piqued. So, what's the deal with that orb you showed me earlier? Why is it so important? Cathara's expression grew serious, though a glint of humor remained in her eyes. Let's just say it's the key to something much bigger than either of us, and it has a lot to do with why I waited for you. Eli frowned. Bigger how? Cathara hesitated, then smiled faintly. You'll see. But for now, let's enjoy a moment of peace. After all, knowing you, it won't last long. Eli chuckled despite himself. Fair point. As the stars stretched out before them, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far larger and far stranger than he could have ever imagined. Eli leaned against the co-pilot's seat, staring at the shimmering orb Cathara had placed between them. Its surface rippled like molten silver, the faint symbols etched into it glowing and fading in a rhythmic pattern. It didn't hum, buzz, or emit any discernible noise, yet it radiated an undeniable presence, a soft pull, like gravity with an attitude. So, Eli began, his tone casual, is this thing going to explode if I touch it? Because I feel like my life expectancy's already taken enough hits today. Cathara chuckled, a light sound that contrasted with the intensity in her gaze. Only if you touch it wrong. Define wrong, Eli said, pulling his hand back as she reached for the orb. Human arrogance combined with ignorance, she replied smoothly, a teasing smirk playing on her lips. In other words, let me handle it. Eli threw up his hands in mock surrender. Fine. By all means. Handle the mysterious space artifact that's apparently more temperamental than I am. Cathara placed her hands over the orb, her fingers splaying delicately across its surface. As soon as she made contact, the symbols blazed brighter, casting dancing lights across the cockpit. The patterns shifted and reformed, aligning into what Eli could only describe as a holographic map, a breathtaking three-dimensional display of stars, planets, and nebulas that floated above the orb. Okay, I'll admit, that's impressive, Eli said, leaning closer. Is it a map? Cathara nodded, her expression unusually serious. Not just any map. This is a piece of the Celestine Codex. Eli blinked. The Celestine what now? The Codex, she repeated, her voice reverent. It's a collection of knowledge, ancient, powerful, and until recently, thought to be a myth. Legend says it was created by the architects, a species so advanced they transcended physical existence millennia ago. And what? They left breadcrumbs for the rest of us to find? Eli asked, squinting at the glowing map. Not breadcrumbs, Cathara said, her tone soft but firm. A test. The Codex isn't just knowledge, it's a key. Together, its pieces unlock a gateway to... She hesitated, as though weighing whether to say more. Finally, she added, something extraordinary. Eli frowned. That sounds suspiciously like the setup for a disaster movie. Cathara laughed lightly, but there was no mistaking the weight in her voice when she said, or the beginning of something incredible. It depends on who finds it first. Let me guess. Someone less friendly is looking for this thing? Eli asked, his tone dry. Cathara shot him a look. You mean besides the bounty hunters? Yes, the syndicate. They're relentless, and they'll stop at nothing to collect every piece of the Codex. The syndicate? Eli groaned. Fantastic. I've dealt with them before. They're not exactly known for their negotiation skills. Cathara's brow arched. You've tangled with the syndicate? Let's just say they're not big fans of my creative approach to cargo redistribution, Eli muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. What happens if they get their hands on the Codex? Cathara's expression darkened. If they collect the pieces, they could use it to access technology far beyond what even the most advanced civilizations can imagine. It would give them the power to dominate entire galaxies, or destroy them. Eli let out a low whistle. No pressure, then. She smirked. I'd say you're getting the hang of this already. He leaned back, crossing his arms. So, why drag me into this? I'm not exactly hero material in case you haven't noticed. Cathara's gaze softened, her glowing eyes meeting his. Because I know you, Eli. Beneath all the bad jokes and questionable life choices, there's someone who keeps his promises, even if it takes him a while. The sincerity in her voice caught him off guard. He opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by the ship's AI, an androgynous voice with a dry, sarcastic edge. Pardon the interruption, esteemed occupants, the AI intoned, but we appear to have company. Again. Eli glanced at the display, where a trio of syndicate ships were closing in fast. I hate being right. Cathara sighed, her fingers flying over the controls. Strap in, Captain Ford. Things are about to get interesting. I was hoping you'd say boring, Eli muttered, buckling himself in as the ship's engines roared to life. Cathara executed a sharp turn, the ship veering away from the syndicate vessels. The stars outside blurred into streaks of light as they entered a dense asteroid belt. Do all your plans involve asteroids? Eli asked, gripping his seat as Cathara maneuvered through the rocky maze. They're effective, she replied with a grin. And unpredictable. Unpredictable is one way to describe it. Reckless is another, Eli quipped as a massive asteroid loomed ahead. Cathara twisted the controls, narrowly avoiding the collision. You're welcome. The syndicate ships weren't as nimble. One clipped an asteroid, spiraling out of control before exploding in a brilliant burst of light. 2 left, Eli noted, scanning the display. Got any more tricks up your sleeve? Cathara's smile turned mischievous. Just 1. She flipped a switch, and the ship's hull shimmered, cloaking them in a field of refracted starlight. The Syndicate ships hesitated, their scanners unable to pinpoint their target. Is that invisibility? Eli asked, his voice tinged with awe. More like advanced camouflage, Cathara corrected. But yes, it's very effective. Remind me to ask for a full tour of this ship later, Eli said, as the Syndicate ships drifted off, unable to find them. Cathara deactivated the cloak, her expression a mix of satisfaction and exhaustion. I think we've earned a moment to breathe. Agreed, Eli said, unbuckling his harness. He gestured toward the orb. So, what's our next move? Cathara studied the map, her gaze thoughtful. The codex piece we have is only one of several. The next is on a planet called Erithos, a world at the edge of known space. Erithos, huh? Eli mused. Sounds peaceful. Cathara laughed, a sound that carried both amusement and a hint of warning. Oh, it's anything but. I hope you're ready, Captain Ford. Eli leaned back with a wry smile. Ready? I was born ready. Cathara's eyes sparkled with humor. We'll see about that. As the ship hurtled toward its next destination, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that this journey was going to test him in ways he hadn't anticipated. Still, there was something about the way Cathara looked at him, an unshakable faith that made him want to live up to her belief, even if it killed him. The planet Erithos loomed on the main view screen, its surface swirling with ominous shades of red and gold. Vast deserts stretched endlessly across the horizon, broken only by jagged mountain ranges and shimmering heat mirages. From orbit, it looked like someone had taken a fiery gemstone, dipped it in chaos, and set it spinning in space. Welcome to Erithos, Cathara said, her tone laced with dry amusement as she piloted the ship into the planet's upper atmosphere. Eli stared at the screen unimpressed. Looks like the inside of a barbecue pit. Please tell me there's at least a bar down there. Cathara chuckled. If by bar you mean rickety trading outposts run by opportunistic smugglers, then yes, there are plenty. Great, Eli said, leaning back in his seat. Just the kind of hospitality I was hoping for. The ship shuddered slightly as it descended, turbulence rocking them back and forth. Cathara adjusted the controls with practiced ease, but Eli still clutched the armrests like his life depended on it. Relax, Captain Ford, Cathara teased. I've landed on worse planets than this. Comforting, Eli muttered. Though I'm not sure what counts as worse, a volcano world, a black hole beach resort? Cathara grinned. Try a planet covered entirely in carnivorous plants. Now that was an adventure. Eli blinked. You're kidding, right? Her silence and the mischievous glint in her eye told him she wasn't. The ship touched down on a patch of relatively flat ground near what appeared to be an abandoned mining settlement. As the engines powered down, Eli stood and stretched, trying to shake off the lingering tension from their descent. So, what's the plan? He asked, following Cathara as she grabbed a satchel and slung it over her shoulder. The next piece of the codex is hidden in the vault of the Crimson Spire, she said, striding toward the ship's exit. Eli frowned. Sounds fancy, and probably dangerous. Cathara glanced back at him with a smirk. You're learning. They stepped out into the blistering heat, the air thick with a metallic tang that made Eli's nose wrinkle. The ground beneath their boots crunched like brittle glass, and the horizon shimmered with waves of heat. This place is charming, Eli said, shielding his eyes as he scanned their surroundings. Cathara gestured toward a jagged mountain in the distance, its peak crowned by what appeared to be a massive crimson crystal. The vault is inside that spire. We'll need to make our way through the settlement first to gather supplies and information. Supplies, huh? Eli said, his tone skeptical. Because nothing screams reliable like a run-down mining town in the middle of nowhere. Cathara smiled. You'd be surprised. Places like this have a way of attracting the kind of people who know things they shouldn't. Eli raised an eyebrow. You mean criminals? I mean resourceful individuals, she corrected, her voice tinged with mock seriousness. They made their way toward the settlement, a cluster of weathered buildings huddled together as if bracing against the harsh environment. Solar panels covered the rooftops, and wind turbines creaked in the hot breeze, but the place felt eerily empty. Are we sure anyone's actually alive here? Eli asked, peering into a darkened window. As if in response, a door creaked open, and a figure emerged, a stout alien with leathery blue skin and 4 eyes, each blinking independently. He wore a dusty vest adorned with an assortment of mismatched gadgets. Well, well, the alien drawled, his voice like gravel in a blender. Visitors. Don't get many of those these days. Cathara stepped forward, her expression calm but alert. We're looking for supplies and information about the Crimson Spire. The alien's eyes narrowed. The Spire, eh? Dangerous business, that. Lot of folks go poking around up there, and not many come back. Good thing we're not most folks, Eli said, offering his best roguish grin. The alien snorted. You've got the look of someone who's made a career out of bad decisions. I respect that. Name's Vark. What do you need? Cathara handed Vark a list, and he scanned it with one of his 4 eyes, while the others darted around suspiciously. I can get you most of this, Vark said. But information about the Spire? That'll cost extra. How much extra? Eli asked warily. Vark grinned, revealing a mouth full of jagged teeth. Depends. You play cards? Eli exchanged a glance with Cathara, who raised an eyebrow. Are we seriously doing this? Eli muttered. Cathara shrugged. Your call, Captain. 20 minutes later, Eli found himself seated at a rickety table in the settlement's makeshift cantina, a deck of alien playing cards in his hands. Across from him, Vark shuffled his own deck with an air of smug confidence. I hope you're ready to lose, Vark said, dealing the first hand. Eli smirked. Lose? I don't even know the rules. That gives me the advantage. Cathara stood nearby, arms crossed and a faint smile on her lips as she watched the game unfold. The tension in the air was palpable, but Eli's running commentary kept it from boiling over. So, Eli said, studying his cards, do you guys have poker on this planet? Or is this more of a blackjack situation? Vark grunted. It's called Renak's Gambit. And no, it's not like poker or blackjack. Good, Eli said, tossing a card onto the table with dramatic flair, because I'm terrible at both. The game went on, each round filled with increasingly ridiculous banter. By the time they reached the final hand, even Vark was chuckling, his earlier suspicion replaced by begrudging amusement. All right, human, Vark said, laying down his cards. Let's see what you've got. Eli revealed his hand, a collection of mismatched cards that, by sheer dumb luck, formed a winning combination. Well, I'll be, Vark muttered, shaking his head. You actually pulled it off. Cathara clapped Eli on the shoulder. I'm impressed. Maybe there's more to you than bad jokes after all. Thanks, Eli said, flashing her a grin. I think. True to his word, Vark provided not only the supplies they needed, but also a map detailing the safest route to the Spire and the traps that awaited them inside. As they left the settlement, Eli turned to Cathara. You know, for a planet full of death traps, this place isn't so bad. Cathara laughed. Don't get too comfortable. The Spire is where the real challenge begins. Eli sighed, adjusting the straps on his pack. Great. More death traps. Just what I always wanted. Cathara glanced at him, her smile tinged with both humor and resolve. You'll be fine, Captain Ford. After all, you have me. Eli couldn't argue with that. As they set off toward the towering Crimson Spire, he couldn't shake the feeling that the next leg of their journey would test them both in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The Crimson Spire loomed above Eli and Cathara, like an alien monolith, its jagged crystalline surface pulsating faintly in the dim Erithos light. Up close, the spire seemed alive. Its surface shimmered with shifting patterns of energy, casting eerie red reflections across the barren terrain. "Let me guess," Eli said, craning his neck to take in its immense height. "We climb this thing, avoid getting vaporized by whatever traps are in there, grab the codex piece, and then walk out like nothing happened?" Cathara smirked as she adjusted the strap on her satchel. "You make it sound so simple, Captain Ford." Eli shrugged. "It's not my first death trap, and judging by your taste in adventures, it won't be my last." They approached the base of the spire, where an imposing archway marked the entrance. The arch was lined with glowing runes, their symbols twisting and rearranging as if trying to decide whether or not to let the newcomers in. "Well, that's inviting," Eli muttered, stepping cautiously closer. Cathara knelt before the arch, her fingers tracing the shifting symbols. "The spire is protected by a series of challenges," she explained. "Mental, physical, and—" "Let me guess," Eli interrupted, holding up a hand. "Spiritual?" Cathara gave him a sideways glance. "Actually, it's more metaphysical, but close enough." Eli sighed. "Great. So, what happens if we fail one of these tests?" "The spire has ways of dealing with failure," Cathara replied cryptically, standing and brushing off her hands. Eli grimaced. "You really know how to sell an adventure." She smiled. "Ready?" "Ready as I'll ever be," he said, stepping forward with exaggerated confidence. "Lead the way, fearless alien guide." As they passed through the archway, the air around them shimmered, and the world outside the spire disappeared. They found themselves in a vast chamber filled with floating platforms of varying heights, each glowing with a faint, otherworldly light. Eli looked around, his eyebrows raised. "Is it just me, or does this place look like the inside of a sci-fi jungle gym?" Cathara chuckled, but her expression quickly turned serious. "This is the trial of agility. We need to reach the far side of the chamber without falling." Eli frowned. "Falling into what?" Cathara pointed downward, and Eli peered over the edge of the platform. Beneath them, an endless abyss swirled with dark energy, crackling like a storm contained within a void. "Right," Eli said, backing away from the edge. "Not falling sounds like a solid plan." Cathara leapt onto the nearest platform with ease, her movements fluid and precise. She turned back to Eli, her glowing eyes twinkling with amusement. "Come on, Captain. Show me what you've got." Eli hesitated, eyeing the gap between the platform he was on and the next one. "No pressure, right?" "None at all," Cathara replied, a playful lilt in her voice. Taking a deep breath, Eli jumped, and promptly stumbled as he landed, nearly toppling over. "Graceful," Cathara teased. "Hey," Eli shot back, steadying himself. "I'm not an alien gymnast, okay? We humans like to keep both feet on solid ground." They continued through the chamber, leaping from platform to platform. Cathara navigated the course with practiced ease, while Eli managed a mix of awkward jumps, flailing arms, and muttered curses. At one particularly wide gap, Eli hesitated, gauging the distance. "This one's a bit ambitious, don't you think?" Cathara, already on the other side, shrugged. "It's not that far. Just aim for the middle." Eli gave her a look. "Oh, thanks. That's super helpful." He took a running start and launched himself across the gap, landing with a thud. He wobbled dangerously, but managed to stay upright. "See?" Cathara said with a grin. "You're getting the hang of it." Eli rolled his eyes. "If by getting the hang of it, you mean I haven't plummeted to my doom yet, then sure." Eventually, they reached the far side of the chamber, where a shimmering doorway awaited. As they stepped through, the floating platforms dissolved behind them, leaving no trace of the trial they'd just completed. The next chamber was smaller and filled with what looked like floating puzzles, shards of light that shifted and rotated in the air. Cathara approached one of the puzzles, her expression thoughtful. "This is the trial of insight. We need to reassemble these shards into their original forms." "Original forms?" Eli echoed, scratching his head. Like space Legos? Cathara smirked. Something like that. Eli walked up to one of the puzzles and poked at a shard, which promptly zipped away from his hand and collided with another piece. The resulting flash of light nearly blinded him. Okay, he said, blinking furiously. Maybe I'll leave this one to you. Cathara laughed softly as she manipulated the shards with elegant precision, her hands moving in intricate patterns. The shards responded to her touch, aligning themselves into complex geometric shapes. Eli watched her work, a mix of admiration and frustration bubbling inside him. You make this look way too easy, you know that? Cathara didn't look up, but the corners of her mouth twitched in amusement. It's all about focus, Captain Ford. I am focused, he muttered. Focused on how much I hate puzzles. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, Cathara finished the last puzzle. The chamber filled with a soft chime, and the shards dissolved into light, revealing another doorway. 2 down, 1 to go, Cathara said as they stepped through. Please tell me the next one doesn't involve jumping or puzzles, Eli said, rubbing his temples. Cathara gave him a mysterious smile. You'll see. The final chamber was vast and empty, save for a single pedestal in the center. On it rested a glowing artifact, another piece of the Celestine Codex. Eli approached cautiously, his hand hovering over the artifact. Is it just me, or does this feel way too easy? As soon as he touched the artifact, the chamber trembled, and a booming voice echoed around them. You who seek the knowledge of the architects, the voice intoned, must prove your worth. Eli groaned. Of course. Why can't anything just be simple? The room filled with swirling energy, and a massive construct of light and metal materialized before them, a guardian designed to test their resolve. Cathara drew her weapon, her expression resolute. Ready, Captain? Eli sighed, unslinging his blaster. Not even a little, but let's do this anyway. As the guardian charged, Eli couldn't help but grin. Just another day in the life of Captain Eli Ford. Cathara smirked. And to think, you were bored this morning. Eli laughed despite himself. You really know how to show a guy a good time. Together, they faced the Guardian, the Codex piece gleaming tantalizingly just out of reach. The fight was on, and for once, Eli felt like he might actually be in his element. The chamber was still trembling as Eli and Cathara squared off against the glowing construct, its metallic form shimmering with pulsating energy. It resembled a knight forged from starlight, its limbs adorned with alien symbols that flickered like dying embers. The Codex piece floated behind it, tantalizingly close, yet frustratingly out of reach. Do we talk to it first or just start shooting? Eli asked, his blaster already aimed at the towering figure. Cathara sidestepped cautiously, her weapon humming in her hand. The architects weren't known for small talk. Great, Eli muttered. Guess that leaves plan B. Try not to die. The construct lunged with a speed that defied its size, swinging an enormous blade of pure energy. Eli dove to the side, narrowly avoiding being sliced in half, while Cathara rolled smoothly in the opposite direction. Okay, Eli shouted over the hum of the construct's blade. Next time we go after a Codex piece, let's make sure it's guarded by something less homicidal, like a puzzle or a cranky librarian. Cathara smirked as she fired a series of precise shots at the construct, her plasma bolts ricocheting off its shimmering armor. Maybe you should put in a request with the architects. Yeah, because they're so approachable, Eli quipped, scrambling behind a nearby pillar for cover as the construct turned its glowing gaze on him. The construct swung its blade again, and the ground trembled under the force of the strike, sending shards of glowing crystal flying in all directions. Eli peeked out from behind the pillar, only to duck back as a stray energy shard zipped past his head. You're doing great, Captain Ford, Cathara called out, her tone laced with teasing. Thanks, Eli shouted back, reloading his blaster. I'll be sure to put that on my tombstone. Cathara darted forward, using the construct's momentary focus on Eli to her advantage. She aimed for the glowing symbols on its chest, her weapon releasing a concentrated burst of plasma. This time, the blast struck true, causing the construct to stagger backward with a thunderous roar. "Nice shot!" Eli cheered, stepping out from cover to add his own barrage of firepower. The construct recovered quickly, its movements now more erratic and aggressive. It raised its free hand, and a wave of crackling energy surged across the chamber, knocking both Eli and Cathara off their feet. Eli groaned as he hit the ground, his ears ringing. "I take it back. Librarians are terrifying enough." Cathara laughed despite the situation, her glowing eyes narrowing in determination as she sprang back to her feet. "Focus, Captain. We're not done yet." As the construct prepared another strike, Cathara activated a small device on her wrist. A spherical drone emerged from her satchel, its surface covered in blinking lights. "Distract it," she ordered, tossing the drone into the air. The drone emitted a high-pitched whine as it zipped around the construct's head, drawing its attention with flashes of light and bursts of static. "Is that thing going to help, or are we just annoying it to death?" Eli asked, firing at the construct's exposed back. Cathara grinned. "A little of both." With the construct momentarily distracted, Cathara dashed toward the pedestal where the codex piece hovered. Eli followed, covering her as best he could with his blaster. "Almost there!" Cathara shouted, reaching out for the codex. The construct roared, swatting the drone away and turning its full fury back on them. It raised its energy blade, ready to strike them both down in one devastating blow. "Not today!" Eli yelled, throwing a small metallic sphere at the construct's feet. The sphere exploded in a burst of electromagnetic energy, temporarily disabling the construct's movements. Cathara didn't waste a second. She grabbed the codex piece, and the chamber filled with a blinding light. When the light faded, the construct was gone, and the chamber was eerily silent. The only sound was Eli's labored breathing as he slumped against a nearby pillar. "Did we just win?" he asked, blinking in disbelief. Cathara held up the codex piece, its intricate patterns glowing softly in her hand. "We did," she said, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Eli let out a breathless laugh. "Well, that wasn't so bad, if you ignore the near-death experience and the homicidal light night." Cathara smirked, tucking the codex piece into her satchel. "You handled yourself well, Captain Ford." "Thanks," Eli said, pushing himself to his feet, "although I think I pulled a muscle in my ego." They made their way back to the chamber's entrance, the air around them shimmering as the spire's energy seemed to calm. Outside, the harsh sunlight of Erithos greeted them, along with the endless expanse of red and gold desert. "So," Eli said, glancing at Cathara, "what's next? Another death trap? Maybe a relaxing jaunt through a black hole?" Cathara chuckled, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "We'll need to decode this piece of the codex first. It should lead us to the next location." Eli groaned theatrically. "Of course it does. I had a pretty low-stress life before you showed up." Cathara smiled, her voice tinged with amusement. "And yet, here you are." Eli couldn't argue with that. As they headed back to the ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that their adventure was only just beginning, and that the Codex's secrets would change their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. "Hey," Eli said as they climbed aboard the ship, "next time we find a Codex piece, let's make sure it's guarded by something fun, like a riddle-spouting hologram, or a puppy." Cathara laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I'll see what I can do, Captain Ford." With the Codex piece secured and their next destination on the horizon, the duo prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to face the unknown with humor, determination, and just a touch of reckless charm. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport of the stalwart horizon, their cold brilliance a stark contrast to the warmth filling the cabin. Eli leaned back in the pilot's chair, his boots propped up on the console, and sipped from a steaming cup of something Cathara had called Erithos tea. "So," Eli said, raising his cup, "we saved the galaxy, decoded the codex, and avoided becoming space dust. Not bad for a day's work." Cathara sat across from him, studying the now complete Celestine Codex as its glowing symbols spun lazily in the air. She looked up, her expression caught between amusement and exasperation. "A day's work? You do realize we've been at this for months, right?" "Semantics," Eli replied, waving a hand. "Time flies when you're dodging death traps and being awesome." Cathara shook her head, but the faint smile tugging at her lips betrayed her fondness for his antics. The Codex had led them across the stars, through perilous trials, and into the depths of their own fears and dreams. Now, as its final secrets unfolded, Eli couldn't help but feel a strange mix of pride and melancholy. "So," he asked, sitting up, "what's the verdict? Did the Codex just unlock the secrets of the universe, or did it give us a really fancy recipe for alien pancakes?" Cathara chuckled softly, her glowing eyes scanning the Codex's symbols. "It's a star chart," she said, her voice reverent. "The architects encoded the location of their homeworld, where their civilization began." Eli raised an eyebrow. "A treasure map to the birthplace of an ancient, all-powerful alien race? Sounds like a solid sequel hook." Cathara tilted her head, clearly not understanding the joke but choosing to ignore it. "The architects created the Codex to guide those they deemed worthy to their world, to seek their wisdom and continue their legacy." Eli whistled low. "Heavy stuff. So, what happens if we go there? Galactic enlightenment? Or do we just wake up an army of cranky space gods?" Cathara's smile faded, replaced by a thoughtful seriousness. "I don't know, but whatever awaits, it's a responsibility we share now." Eli looked at her, noting the subtle weight in her tone. The journey had changed them both, but Cathara carried the burden of her people's hopes and expectations in ways he could only begin to grasp. "Hey," he said, nudging her foot with his, "we'll figure it out, together." She looked at him, her smile returning, softer this time. "I know." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before the ship's console beeped, pulling their attention back to reality. The Codex's symbols converged into a single glowing point on the star chart, a distant system on the edge of the galaxy. "Looks like our next destination," Eli said, leaning forward. Cathara studied the coordinates, her expression unreadable. "It's farther than I expected." "Well," Eli said, setting his tea aside and cracking his knuckles, "good thing this bucket of bolts runs on my trademark optimism and sheer dumb luck." Cathara raised an eyebrow. "And the antimatter drive?" "That too," Eli admitted, grinning. As the ship adjusted course, Eli leaned back, watching the stars blur into streaks of light. The journey had tested him in ways he hadn't anticipated. He'd started this adventure as a cynical spacer, someone who avoided responsibility and believed promises were made to be broken. Now he found himself standing beside someone who had waited lifetimes for him to keep a promise he barely remembered making, and somehow he'd kept it. "Hey, Cathara," Eli said, breaking the silence. "Yes?" "When this is all over, when we've done the whole save the galaxy thing, what happens next?" Cathara tilted her head, her expression contemplative. "I hadn't thought that far ahead. Perhaps I'll find a new purpose, a new path." Eli smirked. "Well, if you're taking suggestions, I hear the Galactic Core has excellent cafes. We could go planet hopping, find the best pastries in the universe. You know, something low stakes for a change." Cathara laughed, the sound light and genuine. "I'll consider it," the ship's AI chimed, interrupting their moment. "Incoming transmission detected. Source, Galactic Concord." Eli groaned. "What now? Did someone lose another artifact?" The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the familiar face of Admiral Rhea, a stern woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. "Captain Ford," she began, her tone as no-nonsense as ever, "I trust you've secured the Codex." "Admiral," Eli said, leaning casually against the console. "Always a pleasure. And yes, the Codex is safe and sound, thanks to my impeccable charm and Cathara's, minor contributions." Cathara shot him a look, but there was a glint of amusement in her eyes. Rhea sighed. "The Concord is grateful for your service. However, I must warn you, the Codex's activation hasn't gone unnoticed. Reports of increased activity from the Void Syndicate are pouring in." Eli frowned. "Void Syndicate? Those guys again? Don't they ever take a vacation?" Rhea's expression hardened. "They're not the only ones. Other factions are mobilizing, including ones we've never encountered before. Whatever secrets the Codex holds, it's drawing attention." "Wonderful," Eli muttered, "because things were going so smoothly." Rhea nodded curtly. "Proceed with caution, Captain. The galaxy is watching." The transmission ended, leaving Eli and Cathara in silence. "Well," Eli said, clapping his hands, "looks like our relaxing retirement plan is on hold." Cathara smiled, her expression calm despite the weight of their mission. "Perhaps it's for the best. The galaxy rarely allows its heroes to rest." "Heroes?" Eli repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I'm just a guy trying not to get vaporized." Cathara chuckled softly. "And yet, here you are." Eli looked at her, the corners of his mouth quirking into a smile. "Yeah, here I am." As the ship hurtled toward its next destination, Eli felt a strange sense of peace. The road ahead was uncertain, and the challenges would only grow more daunting, but for the first time in his life, he wasn't running away. He was keeping a promise. And somehow, that made all the difference.